Sarah and Mark had always dreamed of owning a charming old house with character. So, when they stumbled upon a dilapidated Victorian mansion tucked away on a quiet street, they couldn't believe their luck. The place was a mess, but they saw its potential. With determination, they began the renovations. The first few weeks went smoothly as they painted walls, replaced floorboards, and restored the grand staircase. But then, strange things started happening. One evening, Sarah left her paintbrush on the kitchen counter while she went to fetch a glass of water. When she returned, the brush was on the floor and the faucet was running. She assumed it was Mark playing a prank, but he denied it. As days turned into weeks, the occurrences became more unsettling. Tools would vanish only to reappear in odd places. Eerie whispers echoed through the empty hallways at night, and both Sarah and Mark felt a constant chill in the air, no matter how high they turned up the heating. One evening, as they relaxed in the living room after a long day's work, they heard the creaking of footsteps on the stairs above. Their hearts pounded as they looked at each other, both thinking the same thing. Mark grabbed a flashlight and they crept up the staircase, their footsteps echoing through the hollow house. The upper floor was dark, save for the occasional flicker of a candle-like glow that seemed to be moving ahead of them. Following the eerie light, they found themselves in a dusty, neglected room. There, in the corner, stood an old trunk. As Mark opened it, they found a series of handwritten letters tied with a faded ribbon. The letters were dated from the early 1900s and were addressed to a woman named Margaret. The letters spoke of a forbidden love affair between Margaret and a man named Samuel. Margaret's husband, it seemed, had discovered their secret, leading to a terrible tragedy. The final letter hinted at a curse placed upon the house, a curse that would torment anyone who dared to live within its walls. Sarah and Mark were horrified by what they had uncovered. They couldn't believe they had stumbled upon such a dark secret hidden within their dream home. But they couldn't deny the escalating paranormal activity that had plagued them since they began the renovations. Fearing for their safety, they decided to leave the house, but the malevolent presence wasn't ready to let them go. As they packed their belongings, a sudden gust of icy wind blew through the room, extinguishing the candles and plunging them into darkness. Terrified, they stumbled toward the door, but it slammed shut before they could escape. The room seemed to come alive, with furniture floating in the air and ghostly figures appearing all around them. Desperate and overwhelmed, they clung to each other, reciting prayers and begging for release from the vengeful spirits. Finally, as the clock struck midnight, the apparitions vanished, and the oppressive atmosphere lifted. Sarah and Mark fled the house, never looking back. They left behind their dream home, realizing that some dreams are better left unfulfilled, especially when they come with a curse. As they stood outside in the cold night air, the full moon casting an eerie glow on the old Victorian mansion, they couldn't help but wonder about the tragic love story they had uncovered. Margaret and Samuel's forbidden love had brought them together even in death, bound to the house by a curse that sought to punish anyone who dared to intrude. Months passed, and Sarah and Mark tried to put the horrifying experience behind them. They moved into a new house and tried to forget the haunted mansion. However, the memories of that night continued to haunt their dreams. One rainy evening, Sarah received a mysterious package in the mail. It was addressed to her, but there was no return address. Inside the package was a single weathered letter, written in the same handwriting as the letters they had found in the trunk. The letter was from Margaret, or at least that's what it claimed. It spoke of regret, of a love that could never be, and of a longing to break free from the curse that bound her to the house. It asked for their help, their understanding, and their forgiveness. Sarah and Mark were perplexed and frightened. How could this be possible? Had they truly communicated with the spirits that haunted the old mansion? They decided to seek the advice of a paranormal investigator to unravel the mystery. The investigator, a middle-aged woman named Evelyn, arrived at their new home with a bag full of equipment. She listened intently as Sarah and Mark recounted their experiences and showed her the letter they had received. Evelyn was intrigued and sympathetic to their plight. With the couple's permission, Evelyn set up her equipment in their living room, including cameras, audio recorders, and electromagnetic field detectors. As night fell, They dimmed the lights and waited for any signs of paranormal activity. Hours passed with nothing out of the ordinary. Sarah and Mark began to doubt their earlier experiences, wondering if it had all been a product of stress and imagination. Just as they were about to call it a night, the temperature in the room dropped suddenly and the air grew heavy with tension. Evelyn's equipment started to react. Cameras captured orbs of light darting around the room, and the audio recorder picked up faint whispers. The electromagnetic field detectors beeped erratically, indicating a surge in activity. Then, a voice echoed through the room, faint but distinct. It was Margaret's voice, pleading for forgiveness and release from the curse. Sarah and Mark were paralyzed with fear, their eyes fixed on the spot where the voice seemed to originate. Evelyn, experienced in dealing with the supernatural, calmly addressed the spirit. She asked Margaret why she had reached out to them and how they could help. The room seemed to vibrate with energy as Margaret's story unfolded. Margaret and Samuel had indeed lived in the house decades ago, their love a secret hidden from the world. When their affair was discovered, tragedy struck. Samuel was killed and Margaret's life ended in a desperate act of sorrow. Their souls remained bound to the house, trapped by a curse fueled by unresolved emotions. Margaret explained that Sarah and Mark's discovery of the letters had stirred something within the spirits, a glimmer of hope for redemption. They believed that by helping to free Margaret and Samuel's souls, they could break the curse that had plagued the house for generations. Touched by the spirit's plea, Sarah and Mark agreed to help. With Evelyn's guidance, they performed a ritual meant to cleanse the house and release the trapped souls. It was a solemn and emotional process, filled with tears and forgiveness. As the ritual neared its end, a warm, golden light enveloped the room, and a sense of peace washed over them all. The temperature returned to normal, and the oppressive presence that had haunted the house lifted, as if a heavy weight had been removed. Evelyn assured Sarah and Mark that the curse had been broken, and Margaret and Samuel's spirits were finally free to move on. The couple felt a profound sense of closure and relief, knowing that they had played a part in ending the haunting of the old Victorian mansion. They decided to sell the house, disclosing its history and the paranormal events they had experienced to the new owners. With the curse lifted, the house regained its charm, and its new occupants never encountered the same eerie occurrences that had tormented Sarah and Mark. As for the couple, they continued their lives with a newfound appreciation for the mysteries of the afterlife. They were forever connected to the tragic love story of Margaret and Samuel, a story that had taught them the power of forgiveness and the importance of helping spirits find peace. When Emma inherited her grandmother's Victorian mansion, she saw it as an opportunity for a fresh start. The house stood nestled among ancient oaks, its exterior adorned with intricate gingerbread trim. Memories of childhood visits filled her with nostalgia, and she couldn't wait to restore the place to its former glory. As she explored the house, memories of her grandmother flooded back. Warm evenings in the garden, the comforting scent of her famous apple pie, and the soothing lullabies that used to fill the air. Yet beneath these cherished memories, Emma couldn't help but remember the stories her grandmother had whispered to her as a child, the stories of a haunting that had plagued the family for generations. One evening, as Emma was sifting through her grandmother's old belongings in the attic, she stumbled upon a stack of dusty journals. These journals, she soon realized, were her grandmother's personal diaries, filled with tales of strange occurrences and her growing fear of the house. The entries described chilling encounters with unseen entities, mysterious shadows that roamed the hallways at night, and whispers that seemed to emanate from the very walls. Emma's grandmother wrote of a sense of being watched, of a malevolent presence that seemed to feed off her fear. As Emma delved deeper into the journals, she discovered that her grandmother had sought the help of mediums, psychics, and even priests to rid the house of the malevolent force. But all attempts had been in vain, and her grandmother's descent into madness was palpable in the later entries. Haunted by her grandmother's words, Emma decided to investigate further. She contacted a paranormal researcher named Dr. Richard Thornton, who specialized in cases involving haunted properties. Dr. Thornton agreed to visit the mansion and conduct a thorough investigation. On a stormy night with rain pounding against the windows and thunder rumbling in the distance, Dr. Thornton arrived at the mansion. Emma greeted him at the door, her anxiety evident. Together, they ventured into the heart of the house, armed with cameras, voice recorders, and a sense of trepidation. As they began their investigation, strange occurrences manifested themselves. Doors creaked open on their own, and cold spots seemed to materialize out of thin air. Dr. Thornton's equipment detected fluctuations in electromagnetic fields, and eerie EVPs, electronic voice phenomena, whispered chilling messages. In the attic, where Emma had discovered her grandmother's journals, the activity reached its peak. The air grew heavy with a palpable sense of dread, and the temperature dropped dramatically. Emma felt a presence close by, as if someone, or something, was watching her every move. Dr. Thornton conducted a series of seances and communicated with the entities using a spirit board. Through these interactions, they learned that the malevolent force had a name: Elijah. Elijah claimed to be a tortured soul who had died tragically in the house long ago and had been bound to it ever since. Emma, filled with empathy, tried to understand Elijah's pain and the reason behind his malevolence. As the hours passed, she and Dr. Thornton unraveled the tragic tale of a love affair gone awry, one that had led to Elijah's untimely death and his eternal torment. It became apparent that Elijah sought release from the curse that bound him to the house. With Dr. Thornton's guidance, Emma decided to help. They performed a ritual to communicate with Elijah's spirit and guide him towards the light. It was a fraught and emotional process, filled with fear and uncertainty. As the ritual reached its climax, a blinding light enveloped the attic and a sense of profound peace washed over them. Emma could feel Elijah's presence receding, and she knew that he had finally found the release he had longed for. With the curse lifted, the house felt different, lighter, as if a weight had been lifted from its foundations. The paranormal activity ceased, and Emma could finally breathe a sigh of relief. She decided to continue her grandmother's legacy by turning the mansion into a small bed and breakfast, sharing the history of the house and its spirits with those who dared to stay. Emma knew that her grandmother's tragic story was finally at an end, and she had played a part in bringing peace to the restless spirits that had haunted the old Victorian mansion for generations. Alex and Jess had purchased their dream home, an old charming cottage nestled in a picturesque countryside. The house had a unique character with its exposed wooden beams, stone fireplace, and a sense of history that seemed to seep through its walls. They believed it was the perfect place to start their life together. As they settled into their new home, they couldn't help but feel a sense of wonder and excitement. The cottage held so much potential, and they looked forward to making it their own. But their journey of discovery would soon take an eerie turn. One sunny afternoon, while Alex was inspecting the basement for any needed repairs, he noticed an unusual gap in the stone wall that seemed out of place. Curiosity piqued, he investigated further and discovered a hidden door. It was concealed behind a stack of old crates and almost impossible to spot. Alex and Jess worked together to pry the door open, revealing a narrow, dusty corridor that led to a small, forgotten room. The room was filled with cobwebs, and the air was heavy with the scent of age. But what captured their attention most was an old, leather-bound diary sitting on a dusty wooden table in the center of the room. The diary was dated from the early 1900s and belonged to a woman named Eleanor. As they began to read, they became engrossed in the life of the previous occupant. Eleanor had lived in the cottage with her husband Arthur and their young daughter Emily. Eleanor's entries chronicled the family's life, but as they read further, they encountered disturbing details. Eleanor wrote of a mysterious presence in the house, one that seemed to manifest in the form of eerie whispers, inexplicable drafts of cold air, and objects moving on their own. The entries grew more frantic as Eleanor described sleepless nights and a growing sense of dread. She mentioned hearing voices that urged her to leave the cottage, warning her that something malevolent resided within its walls. But she and Arthur were determined to keep their home and protect their daughter. As Alex and Jess continued to read, They noticed a pattern in Eleanor's entries, the mention of a secret room hidden in the basement. Eleanor believed that whatever haunted their home was tied to that hidden space. She wrote of her plans to uncover its mysteries, but the diary abruptly stopped. Alex and Jess were both intrigued and unnerved by the diary's contents. They decided to investigate the hidden room mentioned by Eleanor, feeling compelled to uncover the truth about the haunting. With flashlights in hand, they descended into the basement and followed the narrow corridor to the secret room. It was locked, and after some effort, they managed to pry it open. The room was small and dimly lit, with stone walls covered in strange symbols and a feeling of oppressive energy that sent shivers down their spines. On a rickety wooden shelf, they discovered a series of old journals that had belonged to Arthur. As they skimmed through the entries, a chilling narrative began to emerge. Arthur had continued where Eleanor left off, documenting his own experiences with the malevolent force that haunted the house. He wrote of being tormented by vivid nightmares, of feeling a cold, clammy hand brushing against him in the dead of night, and of witnessing objects levitating and crashing to the ground. The journals contained pleas for help and prayers for deliverance. As Alex and Jess read on, they realized that Arthur had become obsessed with uncovering the source of the haunting, the secret room. He believed that the key to freeing their family from the malevolent entity lay within its hidden walls. With trembling hands, they turned their attention to the room itself. They searched for any hidden compartments or clues that might lead them to the truth. It was then that Alex noticed a loose stone in the wall, and when he pushed it aside, they revealed a small concealed chamber. Inside, they found a wooden chest covered in dust and cobwebs. With bated breath, they opened it, revealing a collection of old photographs, letters, and a small weathered doll that sent a chill down their spines. The doll bore a striking resemblance to Emily, the daughter mentioned in Eleanor's diary. As they examined the contents of the chest, they realized that it held the remnants of a tragic family history, a history that had somehow become intertwined with the malevolent presence in the house. Determined to uncover the truth and put an end to the haunting, Alex and Jess continued their research. They reached out to a local historian who delved into the history of the cottage and its previous occupants. What they discovered was a heartbreaking tale of a family torn apart by tragedy. Eleanor and Arthur had indeed lived in the cottage with their young daughter, Emily. But Emily had mysteriously disappeared one fateful night, never to be found again. The heartbreak of losing their child had shattered the family, and the malevolent presence that had haunted the house was believed to be the spirit of Emily, trapped in a state of torment and confusion. With this knowledge in hand, Alex and Jess decided to hold a seance in the hidden room, hoping to communicate with the spirit of Emily and offer her the peace and closure she so desperately needed. As they gathered in the dimly lit room, surrounded by the symbols on the walls, they reached out to Emily's spirit. Through the seance, they managed to establish a connection with her, and the room filled with a palpable sense of sorrow and longing. Emily's spirit conveyed her confusion and fear, revealing that she had been trying to reach out to her parents for years, but her efforts had only fueled their terror. She longed for her family's forgiveness, and for a way to move on from the torment that bound her to the house. With tears in their eyes, Alex and Jess assured Emily that they understood her pain and were willing to help. They performed a ritual to guide her spirit towards the light, offering words of forgiveness and love. As they completed the ritual, the room seemed to brighten and a sense of peace washed over them. They knew that Emily's spirit had finally found the release it had yearned for. In the days that followed, the cottage felt different. The oppressive presence had vanished, replaced by a sense of serenity and warmth. Alex and Jess knew that they had played a crucial role in bringing closure to a long-forgotten tragedy. They decided to preserve the hidden room as a place of remembrance for Emily, a testament to her enduring spirit. The cottage, once haunted by a painful history, had now become a place of healing and redemption. David, a talented musician, had always dreamt of having his private recording studio. When he stumbled upon an old mansion in a quiet countryside, he saw the perfect opportunity to turn his dream into reality. The mansion was a grand and imposing structure with high vaulted ceilings and ornate architecture, a perfect setting for his creative endeavors. As David began setting up his recording equipment in the mansion's grand living room, he couldn't help but marvel at the acoustics and the rich, warm sound that filled the space. It was as if the very walls of the house resonated with music. Late one night, as David was tinkering with his instruments and recording software, he heard the faint strains of a piano melody. At first, he dismissed it as a product of his tired imagination, but the music persisted, growing clearer and more enchanting with each passing moment. Following the haunting melody, David found himself drawn to a locked room on the second floor. It was a room he had never noticed before, and the door was adorned with intricate carvings of musical notes and instruments. The room seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy. Determined to uncover the source of the haunting music, David searched the mansion for a key. After a thorough investigation, he discovered an old brass key tucked away in a dusty drawer. With trepidation and excitement, he inserted the key into the door's lock, and it creaked open to reveal a room frozen in time. The room was a magnificent music chamber, with a grand piano at its center. The walls were adorned with portraits of composers long past, and sheet music was scattered across the polished wooden floor. It was as if the room had been untouched for centuries. As David approached the grand piano, he noticed a journal resting on its dusty surface. The journal belonged to a composer named Victor, and it detailed his obsession with a symphony he had never been able to finish. A symphony that was meant to be his masterpiece. Victor's entries spoke of a mysterious muse who had inspired him with hauntingly beautiful melodies. He described the muse as a ghostly presence that would visit him in the dead of night, whispering enchanting compositions into his ear. As David read on, he realized that Victor had been consumed by his desire to complete the symphony. He had isolated himself from the world, pouring all his creative energy into the haunting melodies that had been gifted to him by the enigmatic muse. But Victor's obsession had taken a toll on his sanity. He wrote of sleepless nights, of hearing the muse's voice even during waking hours, and of a growing darkness that seemed to overshadow his life. David felt a deep connection to Victor's story, as if he understood the composer's yearning for creative perfection. He decided to honor Victor's memory and complete the unfinished symphony, believing that it was his destiny to bring the haunting music to life. With each passing day, David dedicated himself to the symphony, spending hours at the grand piano, composing and refining the melodies that had been left incomplete for so long. The music seemed to flow effortlessly, as if guided by an unseen hand. But as David delved deeper into the symphony, he began to experience strange occurrences. He would hear whispers in the empty rooms, voices that seemed to echo the haunting melodies he was composing. Shadows danced in his peripheral vision, and he often felt a chilling presence watching over him. One night, as he sat alone in the music chamber, absorbed in the composition, he felt a cold, ethereal hand gently touch his shoulder. Startled, he turned to see a ghostly figure. A woman dressed in a flowing gown, her eyes filled with a mixture of longing and sorrow. The figure extended her hand toward David, and without hesitation he reached out and touched it. As their hands met, he felt a surge of emotions, loss, passion, and an unfulfilled yearning for completion. Through the connection, David understood that the ghostly woman was the muse who had inspired Victor. She had longed for her symphony to be brought to life, to be heard by the world, and to find closure for her own unfinished story. Determined to honor the muse's wishes, David continued his work on the symphony, pouring his heart and soul into the haunting melodies. As he composed the final notes, he felt a profound sense of fulfillment, as if he had completed a journey that had spanned centuries. The night he performed the finished symphony in the grand living room of the mansion, a sense of transcendence filled the air. The music flowed through the space, carrying with it the emotions and yearnings of the muse. It was a symphony that spoke of love, loss, and the eternal quest for artistic perfection. As the last note faded into silence, David felt a gentle breeze caress his cheek, and he knew that the muse had finally found peace. The mansion, once haunted by the specter of creative obsession, now resonated with a sense of artistic fulfillment. David continued to use the mansion as his recording studio, but he always left the music chamber untouched. as a testament to the creative journey he had embarked on and the connection he had forged with the haunting muse. Lisa and Tom were drawn to the charm of their new cottage, nestled in the heart of a historic town. The cottage came furnished with antique pieces that added character to the space, but one item caught their attention: an ornate vintage mirror with an intricately carved wooden frame. The mirror hung in the hallway, its aged glass reflecting the passage of time. As Lisa and Tom settled into their new home, they noticed that the mirror seemed to possess a captivating allure. Its reflection had a certain depth and magnetism that drew them in. One evening, as they gazed into the mirror, Lisa noticed something unusual: a faint, fleeting reflection of a woman dressed in a Victorian-era gown, her eyes filled with sadness. Startled, she turned to Tom, but when they looked back at the mirror, the mysterious figure had vanished. They dismissed it as a trick of the light, attributing it to their overactive imaginations. However, as the days passed, they began to experience more peculiar occurrences. Objects would disappear from their usual places, only to reappear in front of the mirror. Unexplained cold drafts swept through the hallway, and they often heard whispers that seemed to emanate from the mirror itself. Tom decided to do some research into the history of the mirror, and he discovered that it had once belonged to a wealthy family who had lived in the cottage more than a century ago. Tragedy had befallen the family when their daughter, Eleanor, had gone missing under mysterious circumstances, never to be found. Eleanor's disappearance had cast a shadow over the cottage, and her distraught parents had commissioned the ornate mirror in her memory. It was said that they believed the mirror held a connection to their lost daughter's spirit and that it possessed the power to reveal her fate. As Tom delved deeper into the mirror's history, he uncovered a series of letters written by Eleanor's parents. In these letters, they spoke of their anguish and their belief that Eleanor's spirit still lingered within the mirror. They described seeing glimpses of her reflection and hearing her voice in the stillness of the night. Lisa and Tom couldn't ignore the unsettling parallels between their experiences and the tragic history of the mirror. They began to suspect that Eleanor's spirit was reaching out to them, seeking to communicate or find closure for her long-forgotten story. Determined to unravel the mystery, they decided to conduct a séance in front of the mirror, hoping to establish a connection with Eleanor's spirit. They invited a medium named Professor Evelyn Hartley to assist them in their endeavor. As night fell, Lisa, Tom, and Professor Hartley gathered in the hallway, with the ornate mirror as their focal point. They lit candles and prepared to communicate with whatever presence may dwell within the antique glass. As the séance began, they felt a palpable shift in the atmosphere. The room grew colder, and the reflection in the mirror seemed to waver, as if the surface held a portal to another realm. Professor Hartley channeled her energy, inviting any spirits present to make contact. Whispers filled the air, and the temperature continued to drop. In the mirror's reflection, a faint image began to form: a young woman dressed in a Victorian gown, her eyes filled with a mixture of sorrow and longing. Eleanor's spirit had indeed reached out to them. Through the séance, she conveyed her desire for her story to be heard and her fate to be acknowledged. She revealed that she had been trapped in a liminal state, unable to move on until her story was acknowledged and the mystery of her disappearance was solved. Lisa and Tom listened attentively, offering words of compassion and understanding. They assured Eleanor that they would do everything in their power to uncover the truth about her fate and to help her find the peace she sought. With their promise, Eleanor's spirit seemed to brighten and the room filled with an ethereal light. It was as if a weight had been lifted, and the mirror's surface grew still and serene. In the days that followed, Lisa and Tom embarked on a journey to uncover the truth behind Eleanor's disappearance. They combed through historical records, conducted interviews with local historians, and even consulted psychics to piece together the puzzle of the past. Their efforts led them to a hidden chamber in the cottage's basement, a chamber that had been sealed for decades. Inside, they discovered a collection of old journals and letters that revealed a dark secret: the involvement of a trusted family friend in Eleanor's disappearance. With this newfound knowledge, Lisa and Tom sought justice for Eleanor, even if it was long overdue. They brought the evidence to the authorities, leading to the posthumous exoneration of Eleanor's name and the exposure of the guilty party. Eleanor's spirit, freed from the torment of her unresolved story, visited Lisa and Tom one final time. In the reflection of the ornate mirror, she appeared, her eyes now filled with gratitude and peace. She thanked them for their dedication and compassion, and assured them that she could finally move on to the next realm. As time passed, the cottage's haunting occurrences ceased, and the ornate mirror no longer held a connection to the past. Lisa and Tom decided to keep the mirror as a symbol of their journey, one that had brought justice, closure, and peace to a long-forgotten tragedy.